Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. 25 years ago, a vet carrying out routine checks on pigs at an abattoir in Essex spotted the signs of a highly contagious disease, foot and mouth. It was confirmed on the 19th of February 2001, and within days the infection had spread across the country. By the end of the outbreak in September that year, more than 2,000 farms had been infected, but livestock were culled on around 10,000 farms because of the control operation. In all, 6.5 million cattle, sheep and pigs were slaughtered. The total cost to the UK economy was estimated at £8 billion. The emotional cost to farming families, well, that is incalculable. I've come to the market town of Hatherley and I'm actually standing between two big heads. One is a ram, the other is a bullock, and they were placed here to commemorate the foot and mouth outbreak. It says actually on the plaque, foot and mouth disease had a devastating effect on local businesses and touched everyone in the county. Well, this memorial was actually unveiled by the man standing next to me, Anthony Gibson, who was the regional director of the National Farmers Union here in the southwest of England at the time. Anthony, why was it important to have a memorial?
There were more farms around Hatherley than anywhere else in Devon that had their animals slaughtered. Holsworthy was almost as bad, but it was almost as if war had broken out. Even Exeter went quiet because of the enormity of what was going on out in the countryside. It's hard to exaggerate the sense of shock that there was in the community in Devon around what was happening. You know, the funeral pyres, the pools of smoke over the countryside. It was like a gigantic charnel house, this part of Devon. It stank of death. It was a cataclysm.
One of the things I remember really strongly, at the time, for obvious reasons, we weren't going onto farms, but farmers would come up to the end of the lane to talk to us. And one farmer came up to the end of the lane and burst into tears. And I remember being so shocked because he was an old man, you know, very traditional. But it was the first time he'd left the farm, even just to walk up the lane, in weeks.
Yeah, quite a few farmers just cut themselves off on their farm. They sent their families away. Wife and children go away and stay with relatives and just stayed on the farm on their own so as not to spread the disease. Sadly, that wasn't universal, though. You know, there were other farmers who made little or no effort to prevent the virus getting into their herds. The compensation for having your animals slaughtered was very, very generous, and that created actually quite a lot of ill feeling. And some of that is still there, even 25 years on. But the vast majority of the farmers were just desperate to avoid their animals getting the disease and to avoid the terrible situation of seeing them slaughtered.
Well, 25 years ago, Cumbria was the county worst hit by the spread of foot and mouth. Our own Kaz Graham was there.
It's such a bleak picture to look back on. Cumbria, with almost 44% of the UK's total cases, 45% of all Cumbrian farm holdings were subject to livestock culls, and that rose to 70% of farm holdings in the north of this county. More than 1 million sheep, 215,000 cattle, thousands of other livestock on infected farms and those near them were all slaughtered, burned, buried or rendered. So that gives an idea of the magnitude of the outbreak here. But of course, I mean, those figures do not give the human side of the story.
And you were speaking to people affected by it every day during the peak of this outbreak. Just give us an idea of the impact it had on people.
I was living up in the North Cumbrian Fells at that time. I was surrounded by sheep farms, and at that time of year, you know, they should have been bouncing with lambs. Instead, there were big piles of rotting carcasses. There were pyres. You could see and smell the smoke from miles away. There were army Land Rovers, slaughter teams in boiler suits, a haze of disinfectant that you could smell all over the place as well. I was actually taking a bit of a sabbatical from a job at BBC Scotland at the time, and I was working on and off for BBC Radio Cumbria. And I actually hosted a 2-hour live phone-in every night for a month during the peak of the outbreak. It was really emotional, actually, Charlotte. I've got to say, every night we had more callers than we could fit on the air because it was just a place where people could, I don't know, they could kind of pour out their grief, their private grief, and their public outrage. People really needed a space to vent all of that. We heard from farmers who were bewildered and furious about seemingly nonsensical decisions by those in authority, from farmers who barricaded themselves in, they wouldn't open the gate to anyone, and heart-wrenching tales of farmers who lost all of the stock that their fathers, their grandfathers, and they themselves had kept for, generations, and that they were hoping to pass down to their families, to their kids as well. And also, I've got to say, we heard from so many people as well, just from the rural hinterland, hoteliers, shopkeepers, cafe owners whose income had just dried up entirely overnight because the countryside just kind of shut down, really.
Kaz Graham in Cumbria. One reason the 2001 foot and mouth outbreak spiralled into crisis was the length of time the disease had been in the country before it was spotted in that Essex abattoir. Evidence suggested it originated at a pig farm in Northumberland. The most likely source, infected illegal meat fed in undercooked pig swill. The farmer didn't report the foot and mouth symptoms, and so the pigs infected nearby sheep at a busy time of year for buying and selling. The former National Farmers Union Regional Director for the southwest of England, Anthony Gibson, told me about the moment he got the call he dreaded.
I had the phone call from the Devon Divisional Veterinary Officer to say, Anthony, we've got foot and mouth in Devon, and it's as bad as it could be, because it was on the farm of one of the biggest livestock dealers in Devon who had connections with dozens and dozens of other farms. And even at that stage, we realised that we got a really major problem on our hands.
And it felt that the government and the control was always slightly behind the virus at that point.
Well, we were at least 3 weeks behind it. Disease had spread all across the country in sheep without people realising it, because sheep didn't show the symptoms. It was only when they came into contact with cattle, and then the cattle showed the symptoms, then you realised you got foot and mouth disease. So we were always playing catch up. And of course, the contingency plans that we had were based on the 1967 outbreak, when farming was very, very different, and they were simply inadequate for dealing with the scale of the outbreak that we had. Sheep were being moved around the country in vast numbers as farmers organised themselves to claim the sheep annual premium scheme. And that has been stopped now because of the 6-day standstill. If you move animals onto your farm, you're not allowed to move them off except for slaughter for 6 days. So if you brought disease onto the farm, it will reveal itself before animals can then leave your farm and infect somewhere else. So that's an important safeguard that came out of it. And of course the ban on swill feeding.
The other thing that's changed is the speed at which we react. So when we had a small foot and mouth outbreak based around a leak from the Pirbright laboratory in 2007, movement stopped immediately of everything. Complete standstill. That didn't obviously happen in 2001.
No, it didn't. The disease was detected, I think, on the Tuesday, and the complete movement standstill was put in place on the Friday, and an awful lot of sheep were moved during the course of those 3 or 4 days. You can't entirely blame the government at the time, because we didn't know the extent to which the disease was already in the livestock population. So it's only with the benefit of hindsight that we can see that was the wrong thing to do.
There were a few changes in policy as the disease went on and on. You went from just killing animals on infected farms to actually killing neighbouring farms' animals. This was called the contiguous cull.
Well, the contiguous cull was just about the biggest tragedy of all. We lost 173 farms in Devon that had confirmed outbreaks of foot and mouth disease. 800 farms had their animals slaughtered, 670 of them in the contiguous cull.
The theory being that if you took out neighbouring farms, then you were creating a fire break.
Absolutely, but it was based on computer modelling, and it was based on a sort of theoretical, like a sort of gridiron of farms where they're all neatly connected together. Farming in Devon isn't like that. You know, we had a lot of NFU members who wouldn't go along with the contiguous cull, who barricaded their farms, kept the ministry vets at bay for the necessary 21 days. And at all of those farms, and there were hundreds of them, only one in post-outbreak testing was found to have the disease.
About 10 miles from Hatherley, on the northern edge of Dartmoor, near Oakhampton, Phil Hurd spent the spring of 2001 watching foot and mouth edge towards his family's beef and sheep farm.
Spring was very typical, as like it is this one. It was a very wet spring.
I should say we're sheltering inside because it is wet and cold and kind of dour outside.
And we were just literally gearing up to start lambing. We hadn't started lambing. We knew we were going to start in the middle of March. You back in mind, are you going to have to lamb the sheep and then cull the lambs in the born? That's in the back of your mind.
Even now, this is difficult to talk about for you.
Yeah, it is. It's not what you breed sheep for. It's not. We try to do our best by sheep, but you don't expect to, for your livestock to be killed in the way they were.
So what happened here on your farm?
We could see it coming nearer and nearer. Our neighbours went down, and another neighbour went down, and we knew we were going to get the phone call to say they're going to cull your livestock.
And that was part of the contiguous cull, not because you had it,
no, we
but
didn't
because you were
actually have
next
it.
door.
Our neighbours did. We were expecting the call the day it came, if you know what I mean.
And when was that?
They took the livestock on this one on Good Friday, and we've got another unit which they took on Easter Sunday.
And they did that on the farm?
Yeah,
obviously.
did that here. The shed was full of dead sheep. The cows, they'd walk them out, give them a barbiturate injection in the cattle crush, walk them back to the shed, and as they went to sleep in the shed, they would stun them in the shed.
Where were you?
We help with it, just to make sure it's done properly.
That must have been really hard.
Yeah, it is. But you can't run away from it. It's just, you were there, it's your place. You got strangers coming in, handling your cattle, so you just want to make sure you're there and it's done right.
What was it like afterwards?
Quiet. Very, very quiet. Come out next morning, there's always, a gate banging, cow mooing, sheep bleating, something. But it was just dead quiet. Nothing. Then obviously the clean-up starts, and of course we had a big pyre down in the field down there, so then they get the teams come in to start making the pyre, loading the animals on it and that sort of stuff, and then after that you got the mucking out, clean up, disinfecting, which went on for most of the summer.
Did you ever consider not farming afterwards?
Personally, no. I was always going to go back into it. It makes you look at what you're doing, whether you want to carry on the same way, do you want to do things a bit differently. We're still beef and sheep farmers producing suckle calves and fat lambs, but maybe just slightly made life a little bit easier for ourselves and not perhaps chasing the tail quite so much.
Is it important to remember to mark 25 years, or actually would we be better off saying it's behind us, it's done?
It's important not to forget it, and it's important not to forget the lessons, but we very rarely talk about it. We never have done, to be fair. It's one of those things that happened. It's a turning point in your life. We always often refer to pre-foot and mouth or after foot and mouth. Oh, was that before foot and mouth or after foot and mouth? Because it's that big of impact on our lives, sort of thing. But it happened, and it shouldn't be forgotten that it happened.
Farmer Phil Hurd on Dartmoor there. Tomorrow in Farming Today this week, I'll be talking to the UK's Chief Veterinary Officer, Christine Middlemas, about how well prepared the country would be to tackle another foot and mouth outbreak. That's all at 6:30 tomorrow morning here on BBC Radio 4 and available later on BBC Sounds. But that's it from us here in Devon this morning. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Sarah Swaddling, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.